Okay, so before I take the bumper off, I have a few little things I want to address as far as the gapping around the bumper. What I had to do here is thank goodness we got AMD to supply us with pieces and parts for these old cars. Otherwise I'd be struggling with a rusty old piece of junk. But the fit and finish around the bumper and stuff like that, leaves a little bit to be desired if you're being picky. Fortunately for me, I had these back end pieces off of the the quarter panels that I used for the front fenders, and so I have this extra piece that I'll be able to. I cut away the piece that was on the car that was kind of cattywampus relative to the bumper, and I'll put this in there and I'll tighten up the gap so that it's all about 3/16 of an inch around. That's the gap I'm trying to achieve around all of these body fitment parts. So, like I said, thank goodness we have AMD to do what they do, or else I'd be messing with some nasty old metal instead of this nice piece. But, so that's where I'm headed with this. So that's that piece mended in there, and just a little quick coat of the black primer to see how it looks, and it closed up the gap. It was like a 1/2 inch gap right there. The other side's not as bad, so it won't need replacing. It's maybe 3/8 of an inch. It'll have to be tuned up a little bit with Bondo, but this was too far. It was going to require about almost 3/8 of an inch of Bondo to get it to close up. So pulled it in with the tin, and moving on to the next thing. Well, I took the bumper off because I'm getting ready to clean it all up and then weld these taillight housings directly to the bumper so I can eliminate the button head bolts that are that hold these brackets to the outer bumper, the chrome bumper. And I just wanted to show you what the original mounting situation was. This is the piece that I cut out, and in order to make room for some of the structures in the Challenger. These 4 holes were what bolted these substructures to the car on the 71. You see they've got a little foam here, keep it from rattling. And so those were out the actual, before on each side, on each taillight. And then, of course, the bumper itself is through bolted with these chromed carriage bolts that you can see from the outside, the button heads. So I've had to eliminate that, the clearance. And what I have now is I have this flange on the top, and this flange has a single bolt hole coming down through the top. So I've got to weld this up a whole lot better. I've just got it welded in 3 spots right now. Then there's also this tab over here that through bolts on a bracket that I showed you before. I'm going to move the camera here in a minute and I'll show you exactly what I was talking about. That's that bracket that I showed you how to make, and the tab that was pre-mounted on this part of the bumper, also mounted to the substructure. Also, I have a little standoff that I'll show you that keeps the whole mess from rotating, and I'll show you that in a minute. Alright, so here's everything uncovered, my mounting system. Right here is that tab, that lower tab that I was talking to you about. It's a little bent tab that goes down. Now I'm going to go ahead, and since it's exposed, I'm going to take this whole bracket back off, weld everything up. I'm going to add some gussets here to give it a little more strength. Here's the 1-inch tube on either side that flange lays on top of. The bolt goes down through the top here into a capture nut on the bottom side of this 1-inch by 1-inch tube. Also, I'm going to have to weld this up a little bit more, as I will have to weld these two over here a little bit better. Here are the 3 bolts that mount this to the end of the frame rail on the car. So that's the whole structure is welded together now instead of just being 2 independent plates. Right here, as you can see, barely see on each side, is little standoffs that I made from 1-inch tube with a welded flat surface on this side here, and I added just a little piece of Velcro as like a foam buffer so that it didn't rattle. In other words, the bumper hangs down on here. It doesn't fasten to these. It just rolls up against it, and that keeps the bumper from rotating. So I've added a little bit of Velcro to there, just to add a little bit of dampening, keep it from vibrating. And like I said, these are the two lower attachment points. Alright, so I just wanted to show you this side because this is how I laid it out. Taking and cutting this opening 1 inch higher than the existing opening. See this blue line? I'll cut the entire housing out so that I don't have to remake the perimeter of the taillight bezel. And then I'll trim off everything up to here, and then move this entire piece all the way up and then add back to the bottom side. Okay, I'll show you that in a minute. So here's the left side, which is already done. As you can see, I've cut the entire housing out of this area, and I'm left with this piece, which I trimmed that 1 inch piece off the top. Now I can move it to the top side and add the 1 inch back to the bottom side, and that effectively moves the entire taillight up 1 inch, and hopefully it gives it a better visual look, a little bit more balance, and we'll see. I thought I'd show you this before I got too far along, so you can see exactly what I did. I took that housing, like I said, and moved it up the hill 1 inch. I took the piece that I cut out of the top and I flipped it over. Reason being, as you can see, this curves away and this curves over. So I turned it upside down, and I'm tacking it into place and making sure that it fits where it transitions on either side over here, because this flares up a little bit, so I had to do a little hammering and doweling there. I'll have to add a small piece at the top because there's a little, like I said, there's a little reverse curve at the top over here. So I just thought I'd show you that before it gets too far along. It's all ground up, and you can see what's happening there. So in between welding and grinding on that bumper, which is mind-numbingly boring, I take a little break, take care of some of these little knick-knack jobs that have to be done while the bumper's off. This is a final closure for this section here. There's a little upright that goes up here that manages the inside of the quarter at the bottom, and that'd be tied across to the body of the car, the inner body of the car, and close in that little corner, grind it up and paint it up before I put the bumper structure back on the car. Also, one of the other areas that I did work on was working while I had it off to reset this corner up a little higher, just like I did on the other side. This one, the gap, the side-to-side gap was, or the front-to-rear gap, I should say, between the bumper and this piece wasn't too bad, so I just kept the lower section intact and spliced in that corner piece on the top side to try and finish the closure out. Alright, so that corner's blocked out now, and that corner's blocked out now, connected to the chassis, so that's pretty good and solid now. Also, I went ahead and I painted out those cross cuts that I made on the diagonal, the bottom of that trunk space, so they're a lot less visible. Another thing I did was there was a flange sticking down here for the old sub bumper, the steel sub bumper, and I shaved that off even to try and raise it so that when I bring the roll pan across, that won't be sticking down below that. I was surprised when I bolted everything back down in here. The battery box is back where it belongs, and this fuse box over here snapped back into place. It's rolled a little bit this way, but not much, so everything's back in its stock location, which I'm pretty happy about that. I hate having things out of whack like that. Well, it was a lot of grinding, a lot of welding, But that's pretty much where I'm at with this. And now I have to treat it with a little asphalt on the backside. I media blasted what I could. The substructure was media blasted, but I can't fit the rest of the huge bumper into the my little media blast box. So I just went ahead and I did what I could with grinders and wire wheels, and now I'll have to hit it with a little OSFO to try to neutralize what little rust is in the pitting on the back side before I paint it up on the back side. So we have an extra inch on this top side here, so that's taller, and our tail light housings are up also an inch, so that adds about an inch to the bottom of the bumper effectively. And I went ahead, and the places where the button head or carriage bolts went through, and locations like this, and I can't even see where they were. There's another one over here, I believe, right here. That has they've all been welded up. Those holes have been there's one right there. You could see where it used to be, so that this will have a nice clean appearance once it's bolted onto the car. These housings on the back side have been welded solid to the bumper, so they're part of it now, so that when I go ahead and put this thing up there, it's all one piece. Let me just see if I can roll it up here and show you what that looks like over here. Okay, those are the housings welded into where they normally would bolt in. Made sure you can see there's Cleco holes. I made sure that before I unbolted them, I had Cleco holes to realign this back to the back side of the bumper before I welded it up. Hopefully everything will go back in just the way it came out. And you can see there's still some surface rust that I couldn't quite get all of it. So like I said, I'm going to have to treat that, and before I put some rust converting primer on there, and we're good to go. Now I have to take this is the bumper substructure that I took off the car. This is the way it would appear. You can see those two little blue lines. I still have to trim those off, and I have to go ahead and weld this all up good, because I just welded what I could in place, and there was places I couldn't reach. So I'll do that, and then I'll get that painted up also before it goes back on. Anyway, that's where we're at. Okay, it's time to, now that I've got the back of the bumper painted up, time to start puzzling over the tail lights. And the reason I'm going to deal with this now, except instead of down the road, this might seem premature, but this is some pretty closed quarters over here, and I got to make sure that I'll be able to get bulbs, the sockets in and out, based on the Challenger housings that I have, that I'm going to have to cut apart and adapt to. This is the 71 style housing for the taillights. So you can see there's two taillights, and in the center there's where the reverse bulb goes. Now the Challenger is a little bit different. It has stop lamps all the way across the whole back, but I'm just going to focus on, this is the two corners, in using this housing here, and trying to cut this away. And this is just two stop lamps on either side. So I'm going to try and cut these away and somehow work them into these aluminum housings here. Now I'm end up just cutting these aluminum housings straight across here, and then fusing, attaching these housings, cutting it in half, and separating these two housings, and spreading them out. And it's about 4 inches from top to bottom here, which is interesting because that's about the same size as this Challenger. It's right from this point to this point, it's 4 inches. So it might just do me well to cut those completely off, stop, don't even try to fool with them, and just try to slide these over or inside. Well, one of the main reasons I want to use these housings, obviously, is the reflectivity of the silvering in these is much greater than the old car. The old car just had like an aluminum paint over the aluminum. It was a bit shiny, but these are actually chromed backers in here, and they have a whole lot more, they're a whole lot brighter. In addition to that, the suggestion has been made that I should go with LED bulbs, which is just merely swapping out of the bulbs, but I've got to fit up the sockets here and everything and make it all work together. So I'll be fiddling with that and see how that goes. So we got a little chop, cut, and rebuild going on here. What you see in front of you is I'm starting to salvage all of the reflectors out of the Challenger rear tail light. I'm going to need various parts of all of these pieces, such as the place where the bulbs connect or lock in. I'm going to have to chop those out. I'm going to need the reflectors to put in as backers into the old housing that I have over there, the original 71 housing. So, I have to cut all these lenses off and just get the basics of what I need. These are for the tail lights, so I need both a reflector and I also need a separate piece just to locate the bulb in the other housing. Unfortunately, they won't go in this position. I thought I could just replace the existing housings with these, but there's not enough clearance to get the bulb popped back out. Once it's installed, you have to remove the whole bumper and bumper structure just to replace a bulb if it went out in the taillight. So I'm going to have to put the bulbs so that they load from the top, but I still need the reflector and I still need the bulb to center up on that location once it's in the housing. So I'll be working all of that out. Just like I said, right now I'm just doing a little chopping up and gathering up all my pieces and parts and see what's usable and what will fit where. I just thought I'd show you what it looks like after. This is a before. It's got a bunch of plastic extrusions that are different fastening points, and what I'm actually ends up with is, after I carve off all of that stuff using just a reciprocating air saw, just to go down and carve all of that stuff off, and this is what I'm after, just the basic reflector and housing without all that rigmarole and extra stuff. Just so you can see, these ones over here are also finished up, and it's just all of the extrusions have been cut away, and I've just got the basic housing left. Okay, so you can see what I'm up to now. There's this is the partial tail light reflector off the Challenger, and it's cut out to fit down into this pocket here. And believe it or not, there's enough space. These are so deep that there's enough space behind here to accommodate the bulb housing, and that works out just good. So I'm going to basically fasten this in here, and you could either take the lens off and then change the bulb out directly. You don't have to pull the socket out as you would in the Challenger from the back side. So just run a little test here just to see how that looks, and that's basically what we got right there. So it's going to work just dandy. So got to go about fitting up the rest of them and move on. There's booby traps everywhere. So initially I was going to make the housing to where I would just be able to take this socket, and this socket being flat on the bottom side here, and the wires coming out of the side of the socket would lay right at the back very nicely over here, and I wouldn't have to do anything to alter this housing. But as you can see, I've got a huge hole in the back here, and the reason being is I grabbed the harness from the opposite side of the car, the other set of taillights. So this is from one side, and the harness looks exactly alike, except these wires exit from the rear of the socket, and if you'll take a look at the depth of this thing, that's quite different. Now, they're both They're both the stop lamps and turn signals from the right and the left. Don't understand. Maybe there was a problem with one of the housings, and they changed it out, and this was a aftermarket. God only knows, but this is what I'm working with now. So anyway, I had to make a clearance hole so that this would fit through, so the wires could pop through the back of the housing. You still don't have to take this socket out through the back side. You can still take the lens off and change the bulb from the front side. But in the meantime, I came up with this rig for the drill press in order to stabilize it. I just thought I'd show it to you. It has 3 holes right here that match up with the 3 holes on this housing here. And then there's a couple of slots here. And what that does is it sits it so that you could bring the hole saw down, and you don't risk life and limb being this is an uneven surface, and you want to stabilize it as much as possible. So this is clamped down when I'm drilling, and I'm going to have to do the same on the other side, and of course the other side fixture. Anyway, some things don't just work out. I mean, I just happened to be looking at the other harness, and I thought it looked odd. But I would have just gone on my merry way, with this one harness. It's like, okay, that's a sample of what the bulbs look like and the sockets. I'll just go along and do my thing. But then I just walked over and took a look at this for some reason, and I noticed these were different. And anyway, you adjust as you go. Well, that's one tail light housing done, one to go. I just fit the bulbs in there real quick, see if everything would work okay. But yeah, so one more to go. It's a little bit painstaking and laborious to have to trim around and try to fit these pieces in, but this one had to be cut in half and squozed down and glued back together, but it all worked out okay. So on to the next one. Okay, so here we are mounted back up with the taillight housings in the bumper, and the lenses just temporarily popped in there. Get an idea of what we look like now. I just put a little splash of primer on there to deaden it down a little bit so that you can get the idea of what it's going to look like as a painted out piece. Again, the roll pan is not on there yet, so that's going to give it some added dimension. So be looking forward to seeing how that's going to help everything out back here. But I think I've got what I wanted as far as giving a little bit more balance. It doesn't look so lost like it's under the car. Now it's at a decent height right now. Yeah, so that's it. A few things moved as you would when you're welding things up and laying some heat to things. So it's going to be some tinkering around with it to get some things refined. But so pretty happy with that, and it's time to move on to something else.